Okay, we're going live now.
Okay.
I think we're live. So thank you, Bumi, for accepting to do this interview with me. Like I was telling you earlier before it's time now, I think our people will join us. Okay, I can see that it's playing. I say it's important that when we have ideas, we document them so that they become immortalized and they become materialized. And even after we're gone, the next 20, 50, 70 years, 100 years, people will come and see. They will agree, they will disagree, and maybe they will learn some stuff. So as you can see from the topic, is about Africa, the New World Order. We have a lot of questions, and I have a guest with me. Her brain is going with a lot of information, and I said, no, 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 no. I said, you have to come and speak about this. So thank you so much for accepting to do this with me. So first of all, I'll allow you to introduce yourself so that the people will get to know you before we go deeper into our conversation today. So go ahead, Bumi. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Bumitela. I grew up in Nigeria, but I now live in the United States. The things I'm going to talk about today, I'm not in any way an expert on. I'm not a politician. I'm not an economist. I'm just an informed citizen who has come to understand certain things that I just feel like most of the world really needs to know about, especially Africans. And we're going through a period where truth has become so rare a commodity right now that I feel compelled to share some of the truths that I know so that maybe other people can run with them. The more people that know these things, the better, because there's a lot of untruths circulating in the world right now that need to be addressed, really, especially as it relates to Africans.
How do you feel about this? Do you feel nervous, afraid, or
About
happy about this interview that we're having?
Oh no, I mean, no. Oh, the nervousness is no more than just that you're live on something. But I'm actually happy to get an opportunity to share this information because Africans, especially, we exist in this Western world, in this Western sphere. We're educated by them. The news sources we trust are from them,
Yeah.
and we have been led to believe that they are honest and that they are fair, and and there was a time when some of these things were true, but that's not the case today. And a lot of people don't have access to the kind of information that I have started to get access to. And I would just like to share and just encourage people to stop assuming that the West of the 50s or the 60s is the West of today. Things
Mhm.
change.
Yeah.
And I feel like Africans especially are not aware of that, especially educated Africans who we're relying on to direct us. They're really just they're not getting what is going on in the world right now.
What do you think about the visit? Do you know that Emmanuel Macron is in Africa right now?
Yes, I'm aware.
Before that, something happened. Something strange happened. So in 2017, Emmanuel Macron, when he assumed his office, he went to Africa in Ouagadougou, and he had a group of students, young adults in Africa, and told them, "Hey, French colonialism is finished in Africa. This is a new era. No more France Afrique in Africa, patati patata." And years went by, no changes. So there are French forces that have been present in Africa for over 15 years. The Operation Barkhane, they have been there for more than 15 years, officially and unofficially. Why are they there? They are there to fight the jihadists. But the problem is that the jihadists are not dying. The situation is not improving. So the people got angry. They kicked them out of Central Africa, kicked them out of Burkina Faso, kicked them out of Mali. All of a sudden, he's now back to Africa and he's discussing. Oh, I watched his speech. I was like, okay, let me hear what he's going to say. He comes around and says, oh, look, this is our plan for you, France. We will not withdraw our military. We will just reduce it. this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do. I was like, gentleman, you are telling us what you want to do, but you haven't asked us what we want. He's just imposing his idea. And this is for me, this is a highlight of what I saw his visit. What do you think about the place of France in Africa, for example? What do you think about it?
Well, right now, I'm reminded of a weird saying that I heard from the Bible when I was a kid. I'm an atheist, by the way, but there's this saying in the Bible that says that the first shall be the last. And I always hated that saying because they never explained to me why the first should be the last. But what's going on in Francophone Africa right now is reminding me of that saying, by which I mean Francophone Africa was in a worse situation than Anglophone Africa because the British, both spheres of countries were still ruled by their colonial masters, but the French overdid it. They really, really had these Francophone countries really, really under their control. They overdid it. And because they overdid it, they are now the ones pushing back much harder than Anglophone Africans. Anglophone Africans are under this illusion that they are free, but none of us are free. Yeah. We're all still under colonialism, what is called neocolonialism, but we don't see it in Anglophone Africa, but they see it in Francophone Africa. And that has meant that they have started to push back a lot more seriously than Anglophone Africa. Take Burkina Faso, for example. They are adamant that they want the French out. And they've invited the Russians to help them in this endeavor. I think a couple of weeks ago, 51 soldiers were killed in Burkina Faso, and the French said, this is why you need us here. Now that they've kicked them out, the French are trying to cause trouble to create a reason for them to stay there. But they are the ones behind all these problems. Like, indigenous skirmishes have always existed in Africa. They exist all over the world. That's just par for the course, unfortunately. It's fights for resources. And it's being aggravated by two things right now. One is climate change. And the other is the proliferation of weapons. Because these people were fighting each other, but when they weren't fighting each other with AK-47s, it wasn't this bad. Where are these AK-47s coming from? They're coming from NATO countries that are deliberately flooding, the Sahel with these weapons, especially so that they can they can have a reason to do two things. One, intervene in African governments, and two, sell us weapons, because these European countries, the industrialized countries, France, UK, US, what business are they in these days? They deindustrialize. They're not manufacturing anything. They sent all their manufacturing to China. They're not manufacturing anything but weapons. They manufacture all their goods and services in China because it is cheaper for them to do so that their own capitalists can make profits. So they're not really manufacturing anything to sell us. The only thing these people are selling us are debt and violence through the sale of weapons. But how can they sell you weapons if you are at peace? They can't sell you weapons if you're at peace. So
absolutely.
In order for them to create a relevance for themselves, we have to be unstable. And I mean, I have so much respect for the young regimes in Francophone Africa that are fighting back right now. And I think that they are doing exactly the right thing in asking Russia to help them. The West will try to convince you that, you're just swapping one imperialist for another, and I'm with the better imperialists. But that is a lie from the pit of hell that I hope that we get to clarify. It's true that every country is serving its own interests. Russia is not Father Christmas, but its intentions in Africa is to form partnerships. It is not to exploit us.
Yes.
Which is not the case with France. France is in a lot of trouble right now because the war in Russia is a war that's being fought for America. Henry Kissinger had this saying that to be America's enemy is dangerous, but to be its ally is
I've forgotten the way he said it.
To be America's is dangerous.
It's even worse or something.
Fatal.
It's fatal, exactly.
Yeah, and that's exactly what is going on right now. The NATO, they had this saying about NATO, that NATO exists to keep Germany down, the US in, and Russians out. And why? The reason is simple. The marriage of Russian energy and German industriousness has always scared the Anglophones, because they just feel like they will surpass them. So they've always tried to make sure that those two never come together and form an alliance. And right now, as China is rising, it's a threat to the US, because geographically speaking, China and Europe are close to each other. So it would be natural for them to do business with each other. Why would you buy something from a country that's far away when you can buy it from one that's closer and cheaper, right? So the US knows this. The US sees that it's being pushed out of this new global economic order, and it's not having it. So it's making its allies literally fall on the sword for it to do well. So if you look at this war in Russia right now, it's an economic war. That's really the core of it. And you can see the US is trying to deindustrialize Germany so that those European industries can come to America, and it's already happening. And it's affecting France.
Let me ask you this. How do you think this war will affect Nigeria or Africa?
Well, it's already affecting us. And but the major way that it's relevant to us is this. It's already affecting us because the war is destabilizing the global supply chains.
Let me give you a perspective. How will it affect Africa politically, geopolitically? Number one. How will it affect Africa economically? Number two. How will it affect Africa security-wise? Are we going to experience another flooding of guns the way it happened in Libya after the war in Ukraine is done? Because I don't know where they're going to keep those guns. Are they going to look for a place to dispose them? I've started seeing reports that guns have been sold illegally on black web. The Ukrainians, I don't know, I'm not sure, are selling some armors that they have to the Russians, and some special weapons are being sold on dark web to some, I don't know, jihadist group in Africa. Because what I'm thinking is, once this war is over, what would they do with the rest of the what they call them, those shells, those big missiles that they had that are launched? What would they do with them? They can't eat them. They will have to look for somewhere to dispose them. So how do you think this conflict will affect Africa in this three perspective? Politically.
It's a really good question, but it's a lot of things that you just asked. Part of deindustrializing Europe is, right now, Europe barely has weapons. The US has made it send all of it to Ukraine. So Europe is in a position right now where it can't even fight anybody. Like, if it can't go to war with a major country right now. And that's by design. That's what the US wants. But these weapons in Ukraine, the US is trying to get Europe to get rid of its excess weapons so that it can buy weapons from the US. The US needs money. The US is just trying to find money. But an additional part of this is they want these Europes to end up in Africa. They do. It's going to end up in Africa, not by accident or by mistake, but by design. Somebody just shared with me that the longest underground tunnel in Europe is actually in Ukraine. It goes from some East European country, I can't remember right now, all the way to Odessa in Ukraine, so that weapons are getting to Ukraine. They never even go to the war. They're leaving Ukraine almost immediately. Ukraine is the most corrupt country in Europe right now. And they're sending it weapons that it can't use, that won't change the trajectory of the war. But they're useful in Africa because, and this is why I was talking about America and it trying to deindustrialize Europe and steal its industry, because it's relevant to Africa. Because Europe still uses Africa to supplement its own revenue. So if Europe is in trouble, and Europe is in trouble economically, it's not a good time for it to lose its African resource center. It's like it's getting it on both sides. First, America is literally stealing from it, deindustrializing it, trying to steal its markets, trying to steal its resources, and at the same time, it's in danger of losing its African market. So right now, the world is going through a fourth industrial revolution, where the materials and resources that they need are different. Before it was oil and uranium, but now it's things that will drive the digital age, nickel and cobalt and lithium and all these things. And they're seeing the presence of China in Africa. Yes. And they're seeing that the presence of China in Africa is just so much more positive than theirs. And so if you ask the average African country, who would you rather sell your lithium to? Who would you rather do business with? We're going to choose China, because our experiences with China has been positive compared to our experiences with them. So they are like a wounded dog right now, Europe. They're like a wounded dog. They're losing on so many fronts. And you can see from Macron especially. Yeah. If you listen to any of the speeches at the Munich Security Council that just finished, all of them are still, they're still repeating the party line. Oh, we're going to fight.
Do you understand French?
No, sorry.
Macron is the poster child he's a globalist. That is his philosophy.
He's a global. That's exactly what he is. Even in French, they can't stand Macron because they know what he stands for. And I have to say, I love the French people. They're really pushing back. And when I mention these countries, I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about their governments, because a lot of their people are victims too. And Africans need to understand this, because if you see what they're capable of doing to their own people, then you should know that they don't rate us at all. And we really have to stop listening to their sweet words. So because of the way that France was in Africa, where they were so extreme that now all their ex-colonies are literally pushing them out and inviting Russia in, none of that is going on in Anglophone countries. It's only in the Francophone countries. And this is happening at a time when Europe is looking at abject poverty and severe loss of income. So this is not a time where they can afford to lose their colonies. That's why during the Munich Security Council conference, even though all the other countries were saying, yes, fuck Russia, we will fight till the last Ukrainian, blah, 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 it was Macron that was saying we should calm down small, because they are in serious trouble way more than anyone else of looking at severe economic catastrophe right now. Yeah. So, and for Africa, this means there's a second scramble for Africa going on right now. And you can see it's obvious. When this war first broke out, and the US went to the UN and put a vote to the to the General Assembly, and a lot of countries did not support them like they thought that they would. The US turned around and sanctioned only African countries. It's passed a bill called something. I can't even remember what it was called.
The anti-Russian bill.
Yes.
Anti-Russian influence bill. Anti-Russian influence bill. That's what they call it.
That wasn't it, but I can't remember what it is now. But they didn't do that to the Middle East that we now call West Asia. They didn't do that to any of these places, just Africa. We were singled out to be punished. And what has happened since then? They invited all the African leaders to US. Let's have a conference, blah, 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 blah.
And put them in their places.
They're shitting bricks because now they actually need Africa. And Africa has options all of a sudden that it didn't have. And so they're trying to get us back under their fold. And then they're going to use every tool available to them. So they're going to try the diplomatic way. They're going to try the nice way. But they're also, and we should have no doubt about this, they're also going to try all the brutal ways they've always tried. They will try to destabilize the continent. They will fan any flame of of discord. And this is what they do. They've been doing it for decades. This is the MO, color revolutions. That's what the US does. It will go into, if you have a regime that doesn't want to cooperate with it, that doesn't want to sell it things at the prices that it wants, that does not want to stay under its control, it's going to go into your country under the guise of NGOs, using things like National Endowment for Democracy, the Heritage Foundation. There's so many of them. They go to these countries, they pretend that they're NGOs, but really they are trying to find people who are not happy. So maybe IPOB, or maybe the victims of Boko Haram. All these people, it will give them arms, it will give them money, and it will give them the most important thing of all, legitimacy.
You mentioned IPOB.
It will tell the world, look what Nigeria is doing to these people. It's unfair, human rights.
You know, there was a story recently that came out. I can't remember which international media published it. They accused Nigerians of committing 40-something thousand abortions on the victim of Boko Haram. They say 40-something thousand that the women who were impregnated by Boko Haram the Nigerian military had a special eugenics program to abort all their babies. And to them, this is crime against humanity. There is no proof. They used a Nigerian local journalist to do 2-3 investigation, interview 2 people. No proof. I can't even imagine the Nigerian military coming up with such a program. I don't know who would do that.
Definitely the US, because it's not the first time.
What do you think?
Said about the yoga Muslims.
What do you think? What do you think about the Nigerian election right now that just happened? What do you think? Where do you see our future in the next 10 years? I want to hear your thoughts about that.
I'm disappointed, and this is what I meant by the first shall be the last, because Nigeria is just acting as though the things that are happening are not happening.
Okay.
It's like the rise of China and this war between Russia and Ukraine has changed the world. It's completely challenged US hegemony and the dominance of the West. In many ways, it's like we were in prison and somebody unlocked the door. And this Nigerian election is like, we just ignored that the door is open. And
why do you say that?
Fighting amongst ourselves. Because the election, it's a farce. Democracy it's rubbish. It's a good feel thing that they tell people. I think I posted something the other day. I said that elections don't change regimes, they stop revolutions.
So you're not a Democrat, you. What are you?
Democrat in spirit, as in, of course, I want people to be able to choose how their lives are governed. Every human being on earth should have that right. But when the West tells us about democracy, it's just words. Do they have democracy? They don't have.
So what are you? What are you? What will you describe as your philosophy?
I'm nothing really. I mean, I'm a Democrat, but they're not practicing democracy. They're just lies. They're buzzwords. Did anybody elect Rishi Sunak that's leading Britain right now? What is the electoral college of the US? What is the point of that if it can overrule who the people choose? None of these countries practice democracy. They're just ways, they're buzzwords that they use to make the rest of us feel like we're free and we have some kind of control over our lives and our world that we actually do not. We do not. There was a Princeton political scientist that did an extensive sort of study in the US about 8 years ago, and they determined that what the average American wants his government to do is not even a little bit of a consideration in what the government does. It affects nothing the US government does. The US government does what special interests tell it to do, what Wall Street tells it to do, what the healthcare industry tells it to do, what the military industrial complex tells it to do. And the average person, what they want, it has not mattered here for decades. So then how is that a democracy? It's just a fancy word for them to try and convince you that their system of government is better than the other person's. That if you choose ours, it may not be perfect, but it's still better than these dictators. It's bullshit.
What do you think about the candidate that was elected, Ahmed Bola Tinubu?
That's a good question, especially because Tinubu's Yoruba and I'm Yoruba as well.
And that has nothing to do with it. I'm talking about his person. How he can.
It has a lot to do with it because in Nigeria right now, I'm so disappointed. I'm getting so much pushback from fellow Yorubas who are actually looking at people like me as a traitor.
Okay.
As some sort of a traitor for not backing this guy. Now, there's some Yorubas who believe in Tinubu, who believe that he can actually bring about change. They're misguided, but they're not being tribalist. But then there's still a surprising amount of people who believe that you should vote just because he's your tribe, which is just crazy. But I never supported Tinubu for one reason, his establishments. You cannot vote the people that have been in power for the past 40, 50 years and expect that they're going to change anything. What are they going to change? They've been doing these are their friends. These people in the West are their friends. Even if they have the desire to change, it's going to be hard for them. You know, you need younger or at least more radical people who are going to say, look, we have a chance to break away from being under your control.
People like who?
I don't know, because like a lot of people supported Obi. I don't support Obi because I don't really know him. But one thing I do know is that when young people supported Obi, it's because they wanted something different. Now they may be wrong, they may be naive, they may not know that maybe Obi too is establishment and he will just do everything, the same thing that all these people have been doing. Fine, fair enough. But at least they have the common sense to know that you cannot expect the same people who've been running the country for 40 years to come here and change anything. A lot of the argument is always that, oh, but Tinubu improved Lagos. Did he really? Did he really? And even if you made a change, you made a difference in a state, that doesn't mean you can make a difference in a country. They're completely different things. Tinubu's old, his establishment, I don't see how he would be a man for this time. And that's people do not really understand how very different a time we live in. We went from a unipolar world where the US ran everything. The US ran everything. The US has over 800 bases all over the world. Every country was under US control. And if they were not under US control, you heard about them in the news. You hear about Iran, you hear about Eritrea, you hear about Russia, you hear about the countries that are saying, no, we want to rule ourselves. Right? And for the first time in something like 50 years, because of this war that Russia is in and the rise of China, we're looking at a multipolar world where we do no longer have to be under their control. This is not a time to vote in an establishment guy. He's just going to help those people keep things like they were.
Do you think he will sell us out to the international community? Now, tell you why I'm saying this.
Debates were in Chatham House in England. You see how fast Rishi Sunak came out to congratulate us? Is that what they would do if it was somebody they didn't want? Let me tell you. Let me point you to a recent story of the Tanzanian president. The Tanzanian president, he's a man of vision. He's a man who understood what was going on. Joseph, what was his name? Joseph Magufuli.
Yeah.
When he became president.
But he's dead now.
Yes, he cracked down on the multinationals. He said that they had to pay taxes. He fined them for the ecological damage that they've done to Tanzania. He said that every contract they sign with them is null and void. They must sign new ones today. When they tried to make them take the COVID vaccine en masse, he said no. He said, we're not dying from COVID here. We're not spending money on that. He did all the things the West hates. All of a sudden, he went missing and we heard he was dead. Now there's a new president. She's very, very friendly towards the US. She's friends with Tony Blair. She's friends with Bill Gates. And now the Western press are talking about how, he was a dictator, but she's a good president for Tanzania. But if you ask the Tanzanian people, they loved John Magufuli.
Yes, he was very charismatic.
This is where Nigeria is. If we actually had a president who was doing the things that are in our interest, it would piss off the West. They would be calling him a dictator every day. They'll be writing about him. Is anybody writing bad things about Tinubu?
If they are praising you, you know that you are doing something wrong.
Because our interests are diametrically opposed. Western countries, they peaked. The natural order of things. If they really believed in globalization and free markets like they say that they do, and they don't, they just lie. If they really believed in that, they would let other countries rise. Not that they would. That's how it would naturally happen. Because now it should be cheaper to do things in places like Africa. But they cannot. They're not allowing that to happen. I don't blame them. You should always look after, for your own interests, and that's what they're doing. But for us to think that our interests are their interests is insane. And that's what people like to know. Anywhere the West is praising your global South leader, you're a vassal state, and that leader is a puppet to the West. That's what's the problem.
So, but this is the problem. Now, what is your prediction for Nigeria in the next 10 years, for example? Would you think the economy will come up, or we're going to sell off? Because I see a conflict coming up within Russia, and I see a very serious conflict. Let me explain to you why. All these European countries, like you said earlier, they are selling off their armory. In France here, what we have, 200 plus tanks, cannot take us. Within 6 days, we exhaust everything if a conflict should start with Russia. And none of the European countries has a standing army. None of them, except for France, not even Germany. They are just trying to come up with some defense budget. Even Italy, all of them, everybody's down. So I'm seeing a situation where maybe the conflict is started, will be, I don't know. But the way things are going, I'm actually thinking that the US is financing both sides, actually.
You're thinking
supporting
what?
the Russia. I'm thinking that the US is financing both sides, both the Ukrainians and the Russians. Because I feel right now there are some secret. I saw a report, I think it was in Financial Times, there was a report of secret fleet. They can't trace them. They don't know where they came from. That are busy transporting Russian gas and oil all over the world mysteriously. And nobody can trace them.
Well, that's a result of the ridiculous economic sanctions. Because hubris has set in the US. They were the top dog for so long, just them running everything.
Yeah.
As the years have passed by, the caliber of leadership has just gotten worse and worse and worse. These are the people running the US now. They have no sense. Victoria Nuland, Jake Sullivan, Biden. These are not the diplomats of like the Cold War era. These are just. I don't even want to say the words so they don't ban you from YouTube. But I lost my train of thought. What did you ask me again?
We're talking about US, for example. We're talking about where they're going to.
You're saying that they might be back in Russia and oil is going. So this is the thing people need to know about the Russian situation. After the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia decided to become a capitalist country, right? And the US went there and they did something called shock therapy, which is exactly what they've been doing in the third world, in Nigeria, in all these countries for a long time. They tried to impose neoliberalism, which is an economic policy that says, give preferential treatment to capitalists, keep wages low, crush labor, forget about regulations, forget about, all of that. And that's not something that a growing country like Nigeria needs. It doesn't even work for them, but it's not something, to develop your economy, you have to put money in the hands of the consumer. That's what all of them did to develop all the economies, right? Keynesian economics, that's what it's called. That's when they had very, very generous welfare programs where they really, really taxed the rich. Because the idea that, and Africans believe this, especially a lot of educated Nigerians, they think, oh, you know, support capitalists, support investors, they're innovators, they will stimulate the economy. But in reality, when billionaires have money, it doesn't stimulate the economy. They just save it. How much money can one person? They're hoarding money. The money is not in the economy. It's better for $1 billion to be in the hands of 1 million people who are buying milk and bread and gas every day than for it to be in the hands of a billionaire. He's just going to buy a yacht and put the rest on in the Cayman Islands. It's not going to stimulate your economy, right?
Yeah.
All these countries knew that. When the countries experienced the greatest growth of their experience, it was while they were implementing socialist policies that put money in the hands of the consumer. But what are they telling us? They're telling us to do the opposite.
Are you directly a socialist?
No. And I'll come back to that. But hear me out. I really want people to understand this.
Okay.
It's very basic, but it's extremely important. If you want your economy to grow, you cannot implement austerity measures. You have to make sure that people have money. And they're making us do the opposite of all of that with their structural adjustment programs via IMF and all this debt. They're telling us to do the things that will not grow our economy. And they're lying to us and saying that make your economy investor friendly. But who are the investors? They're people, they're capitalists. And that's what they did to Russia. They call it shock therapy because they did it all at once, whereas with us, it was gradual. And what happened? They were selling Russian industries for pennies on the dollar. All these people made money and ran away. Russian oligarchs, Wall Street, American businessmen. And then Putin woke up one day and said, this is not right. Our standard of living is worse than when we were under the Soviet Union. The life expectancy was lower. Millions of Russians actually died because America brought capitalism to Russia. But what America did, it didn't bring capitalism, it brought neoliberalism, which is what we practice. And Putin realized what was going on and said, no, I will not let you keep doing this to my people. And he stood up and he pushed back. And that's why they're fighting Russia right now. So their first idea to break Russia was, we will ostracize it from the global economy. Once we ostracize it from the global economy, like Iran and Venezuela, it will just collapse. The one we did for Venezuela and Iran will be like child's play. The one we will do for Russia, the world has never seen it before, and that's exactly.
Even Zimbabwe.
And you know the result of that? They were so stupid. They didn't even think. Even their own people, their own central banks and financial their financial minds are saying that was crazy. What are you doing? Because the result is that they are now buying the oil that they've said that they won't buy from Russia, from China and India. Who's adding, Jara on top of the price, and they're buying it on that. So what you're talking about, that is going on, but it's going on because these people shot themselves in the foot. They were so desperate to break Russia. They wanted Russia to be like African countries, like third world countries, where they own it. They have first dibs on its resources. It exists first to supply them at the expense of its own people. And Russia refused, and they got carried away, thinking that they could just sanction. It boomeranged on them. And that is why we cannot imagine the sheer luck of this moment as Africans, that this happened. Because this happened, the bite in US sanctions is gone. Because before, if you told our leaders, why are you letting these people do this to you? They could tell us, dude, I have no choice. These people have all the power in the world. And it would have been true. Because if they throw Nigeria out of the global system, what are we going to do? We will suffer. We'll suffer badly. But now that's not what's going on. Now Russia and Iran have their own financial system outside of the SWIFT system. So if the US says we throw you out of the financial, there's another one now. There never used to be. Now you can't. It's not just dollars that you can sell your oil in. Saudi Arabia and China are doing deals. There are all these financial, all these deals going on, all these, there's like a new world order springing up right now. There was only one before, controlled by the West. The financial world was controlled exclusively by the West. So if you did not toe the line, they will push you out of it and you end up like Cuba or Haiti. Now they have lost that power because China, Russia, India, Iran, Saudi Arabia, huge countries are saying, okay, we're going to find an alternative, because you cannot just wake up in the morning and decide to push a whole country out of the global system. This is the best news that could have been best that could have happened to Africa.
So we have 5 more minutes to round up, but I wanted to use this time to make a proposition for solution, since you just identify what is going on right now, because I don't think a lot of people are aware, and I think this is going to be a very viral moment. I'm going to cut this part out, put it everywhere on TikTok.
I feel like we didn't even get to talk about so many things, but
all right, okay. We'll have more time.
There's one thing that is coming up, and that's urgent right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that is that the West right now, the major worry about Africa is that we're going to all default on our loans. Remember at the beginning of the program, I told you the West, they don't manufacture anything anymore. Before, we used to buy things from them. Our washing machine, our this, our that, it all came from them. Cars, or everything came from them. Now it comes from China. So what does the West sell us? How does the West make money from us? By 2 things: selling us weapon and debt, servicing the debt. They're what you call a rentier economy, a financialized economy. They're not a manufacturing economy. But because of what's going on globally, the global supply chain problems, COVID, the war in Ukraine that's making grain and fertilizer hard to get, African countries are going to be in deep economic trouble. And they're going to face a problem where they have 2 options: feed their people or default on these loans. They're not going to be able to do both. And the West, this is what they're preoccupied with right now, is what are African countries going to do? Because if they stop servicing this loan, it's going to be a catastrophe, because this is where we make our money. And this is the thing that Africans why we need to wake up and understand that this is not about our corrupt leaders. It's not about none of that. It's about a global economy and where we fit into that global economy and the things that are going on now. And the most urgent thing is going to be these loans, this debt that we have with the West. What is going to happen? It is really time for African countries to unite, to reassess where we are. This is not the 1960s when we first all gained independence. It's a different time now. Our enemy has been weakened. We have an opportunity to rise.
Okay, this is not over. We have a lot of thoughts that I need to bring out of your mind. We're going to continue to document this, but we need to create more time. Well, what I want from our people that are going to watch, I don't want it to be 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, because I'm going to cut it into short part. So that was the reason why we have to stop. We have exhausted 42 minutes already, so it will be 45 minutes. That was why I was asking you to round up it up. But it's not over. We're going to come back. If tomorrow you still have time, I will invite you back here. Thank you for people that are watching. You can share the link. I'm going to share it on the other groups and share it on the Pan-Africanist group. We are documenting these things for future references. Yeah. So please, you have to make a promise to me now that you come back.
I will try. And thank you for having me and giving me an opportunity to share this.
I can feel that your mind is bursting with ideas, and we haven't even touched the surface of what we have to discuss. So, but we'll come back. We'll come back, right?
Thank you.
Promise?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Okay. So 45 minutes. So what are your final words with the last 2 minutes that we have before we go?
Propaganda is not just news stories. It's also education. Some of the things we've been taught are wrong. This idea that capitalism is bad and socialism is good. Capitalism is great and social. It's simplistic. No country does one or the other. Please be curious. Please dig deeper into these things. This is really the time. We really can change things right now. But first we have to wake up and realize that it's bigger than just our corrupt leaders.
There is a system. So do you have an idea of what we're going to discuss next that you would like to share?
I mean, I really wish that there was an opportunity to re-educate. You know, you asked me what the solutions would be.
Yes.
They're worth discussing. I think most people think that, you know, it would just be, oh, do this in the education system, do this in the political system, but it's bigger than that.
Okay.
And maybe it's time that we start to talk about how we get ourselves out of this situation that we're in. In
Yes.
many, many ways, we could not be standing at a better moment in history, but it can go either way. It can be our road to freedom, or it can be us getting subjugated again for another 100 years by these people who are in trouble and who've already lived off of us for centuries and will continue to do so if we don't wake up and start
So
to learn
should
for
should
ourselves.
we agree? Should we agree that we'll discuss the solution next time on our next program?
Sure, why not?
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. So I'm going to end it now. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.